Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's session is first in a four-part series where we be exploring various concepts that will help us learn and implement successful DevOps transformation. In this session, we will learn about various software development and deployment models, the importance of continuous delivery, and how Azure DevOps is accelerating software deployments. My name is Hassan Mohsin. I'm the program manager for Microsoft Reactor in Abu Dhabi. Microsoft Reactors are hubs for founders and developers to meet, learn, and connect to local peers, as well as industry-leading ideas and technology from Microsoft partners and the open source community. It's also home to the Microsoft for Startups program, with a diverse mix of hands-on workshops, expert panels, and community events. There's something for everyone. Check out our calendar of events on meetup.com and join our upcoming sessions. Our speaker today is Anthony Prem. Anthony is an Azure technical trainer at Microsoft, specialized in Azure infrastructure and application. And he's passionate about technology and how it can solve complex business problems. He keeps the customers up for success by providing deep technical advisory, strategic consulting through his trainings. I would encourage you to keep the Q&A tab open during this session, and we will be sharing different resources for you to continue the journey and learn more about DevOps, and also for you to send all the questions that you have to our speaker today, Anthony, and who's going to take us throughout this DevOps journey in the four-part series. So I highly encourage you not to miss any of the upcoming sessions. I'll also post links to the other three. And yeah, keep the questions coming. I would like to hand over the mic at this point to Anthony to take us through this first part of our DevOps journey. Off to you.
Thank you, Hassam, for inviting me to this meetup discussion. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Microsoft Reactor Meetup Group and DevOps Learning Series. My name is Anthony Prem. I'm an Azure technical trainer, works for Microsoft. Today, I'll be sharing some of my experience on the DevOps journey, and we will be discussing some of the key principles that are required to get started with Azure DevOps. As part of this learning series, today our focus is on the first module, which is getting started with Azure DevOps. Subsequently, we will be discussing about managing source control, managing the Azure pipelines, and we will also discuss about the deployment patterns, how we can integrate the feedback mechanism to receive the telemetry data from the applications. And finally, we will also see all aspects of security and compliance. The way I structured this 60-minute discussion into 4 pieces. First, we get an understanding of the importance of the DevOps adoption. Then we discuss about how do we get started, how do we start the Azure DevOps journey. And finally, we will see the capabilities of Azure DevOps. So what can Azure DevOps do for us for this transformation? And finally, we can have a Q&A where we can discuss all the questions that I can receive from you. Let's talk about the importance of DevOps adoption. As you probably know, the technologies have been continuously changing. If you look back, as of today, we used to have a data center, private cloud-based platform, but then we are moving towards the multi-cloud architecture. Customer wants to host their services into the multi-cloud scenario. If you look at the application architecture, as of today, most of the applications are sitting in the monolith model, but then we are transforming towards the microservices or event-driven architecture, where we start using various cloud services such as Azure Kubernetes services, containers, functions, app services. Basically, the application ecosystem, it's transforming towards the loosely coupled architecture. And if you look at the access control, we used to focus more on the network aspects, but then we are moving towards the API driven, we are moving towards the identity driven model, right? So as the technology continues to evolve, there is a need for modernization and there is a need for innovations as well. So as of today, everything is changing. The way we used to do, which is getting changed towards the new ecosystem, right? If you look at from the architecture perspective, so far we used to have a centralized architecture, which is getting transformed towards the distributed architecture or the loosely coupled architecture. If you look at the operations management model, we used to focus more on the infrastructure. We used to focus more on the applications, but then as of today, we are focusing more on the applications. If you look at the data, as of now, we are dealing with the big data, where we are dealing with structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, streaming data, and we are basically dealing with the big data ecosystem. And all our applications are developed for the desktops as well as the mobile devices for better collaboration. And when it comes to team management, we used to have an infrastructure team, operations team, development team, and these teams works on silos and they used to work for the individual productivity. But when it comes to the modern world, we are moving towards the customer focused team and we are looking forward the customer success, right? Now, when it comes to change management, this is the important point here. When it comes to change management, we used to release once in a month or once in a quarter, but then we want to release it immediately. If we think from the business perspective, business always wants to stay ahead of competitors. So the business wants to make changes on demand, but most of the time IT is not ready. So there is a need for continuous delivery. So this is one of the key purposes, where the DevOps accelerate continuous delivery. So now let's talk about continuous delivery. What is continuous delivery? Continuous delivery is an advanced lean agile practice. So from business perspective, unreleased changes is equal to risk and released changes is equal to value. So when business wants to make a release and our software development system is not ready, then there is a bottleneck, right? So this is why there is a requirement for the continuous delivery, and Azure DevOps is going to help us a lot to achieve the continuous delivery. So continuous delivery aims to reduce the cost, time, and risk of delivering the incremental value to the end users. So now the next question that you may have, how do we start? How do we start? Where do I start from? Basically, you need to think from three aspects: people, product, and process. And these three are the very strong pillar when it comes to DevOps transformation. So let's talk about people. People are the most important pillar in this DevOps transformation journey. In our traditional approach, we used to have multiple teams like a developer team, tester team, program management, operations team, infrastructure. But these teams works on silos. And we used to mainly focus on the individual productivity. So the whole objective of this DevOps transformation is to enable our team for customer success. So what is getting changed here is the team structure is getting changed towards the modernized way, which is we may have a one practice, which is DevOps practice, where your development team and operations team, they closely work together to achieve the common business goal, right? So the objective of people transformation is you can collaborate more. We are working for the common goals, and we mainly focus on the continuous improvement. Basically, we are bringing the people together. So these are some of the thought process we should think from the people perspective. Now let's think about process. If you look at the software development stages, there are several stages. It starts from planning, and then we code, then we build, then we do the testing, then we release, then we monitor, then again the cycle continues. So what happens is when we started planning, there are some sub stages. Basically, the developers start developing the code, then you need a mechanism where you have to centrally or distributed way to store the codes. So this is where we started using the source control mechanisms. And then you will have a lot of sub stages where you start doing the integrity checks, then you make a build. So during the build, you may have to perform certain test cases. Then once you perform certain test cases, you may have to release it on the pre-production environment and production environment. Finally, we will monitor the application functionality, how this is reacting. So these stages, across these stages, we may put some process. For example, when the build is complete, before it goes to the release, there should be some checks needs to be done. So here, for example, pre-deployment conditions, post-deployment conditions. These are some of the conditions which you can enforce into your DevOps pipeline. So you need to understand what are the process that you are going to bring here. So the whole objective of the process here is we are going to eliminate the waste and we are going to increase the efficiency and we are going to streamline the existing feedbacks from the applications. Now, if you think from the product, across the stages, there are several tools it's being used by the customers. So during the plan, customers may have some set of tool sets during the code. Some customers may have a GitHub, some customer may have a Bitbucket, some customer may have a Azure Repo. Then when it comes to build, there are a lot of tools in the market. And the whole purpose of product transformation is you need to identify the right set of tools which are really important for you to do the DevOps transformation. Because customer A is equal to not customer B. So customer A may prefer to use some set of tools and customer B prefer to use some set of tools. Now it's really important to understand how Azure DevOps is going to play a role and where we can integrate multiple tool sets into the Azure DevOps. So what is Azure DevOps? So basically, there are a lot of definitions available for the DevOps. So some people say this is just a job title, and some people say this is an automation tool, or some people say it's just a collaboration tool, or it is just accelerating the continuous delivery. So the closest definition to me is DevOps is the union of people, process, and product to enable the continuous delivery for your end users. So what you can achieve if you adapt the DevOps practice. It is proven that the companies who have adopted DevOps practice, they have accelerated the software deployment 208 higher than the traditional model. And they can go to the market fast and their failure rate has been reduced a lot. So they can do faster commit. And overall, it is proved that the companies who have adopted the DevOps practice have increased in terms of revenue as well as very less failure rate, and they have avoided from the configuration drift. And this is the survey released by the DORA. So now let's see what can Azure DevOps do here. How Azure DevOps is going to help us to support this DevOps transformation journey. So Azure DevOps have different services. It consists of a couple of services, which is Azure Board, Azure Pipeline, Azure Repo, Azure Test Plans, and Azure Artifacts. So we will see in the coming slides about each services. Now, as we discussed, there are several stages. It starts from planning and planning, code, build, test, release, and monitor. So during the plan, basically your project team have to create certain work items and which typically published inside the Azure Board. So Azure Board allow you to create a project work items like epics, task, issues, which all you can track it inside the project Azure Board. So you get a dashboard where you can track the status, how your team is performing. Now, once you assign some task to your developers start developing the code. The code has to securely stored in the source control system, which is Azure repository. So Azure Repo allow you to do the version control, and you can manage your project source code. Now, once you have the source code on your Azure Repo, the next step is to perform the build. So during the build, we have a product which is Azure Pipelines. So Azure Pipelines allow you to automatically run the build and perform the test cases and deploy it on the production, pre-production, or staging environment. Now, once you deploy your application code into the production, the next step is to do the monitoring. So we have an Azure Monitor application insights products, which you can use to continuously monitor your product, and you can take the telemetry information from your applications, and you can look for a continuous improvement. And when it comes to DevOps practice, it is going to accelerate the deployments, and we are going to continuously look at the applications and see how we can continuously improve the application. So basically, we are taking the telemetry logs from the applications and see if we can improve the applications. Then again, the circle will continue. So this is what we say continuous integrations and the continuous deployment. So overall, Azure DevOps supports you on the complete lifecycle. So as I said, we have starting from plan, code, build, test, release, monitor, and you can plug the Azure DevOps services into the respective places. So now let's start from the Azure Board. So what is Azure Board and how do we create the Azure Board? So the first step that you have to do, which is basically you have to have the project in the Azure DevOps. So now I'm going to show you how we can create a projects in the Azure DevOps. Okay, so I am into my DevOps console. To access the DevOps console, you can go to the dev.azure.com. And I have my existing project. Now I'm going to create a new project for the demonstration, which is Microsoft Reactor. So here you have a couple of options here. So Azure DevOps does support Git repository, or if you want to use the centralized source control system, you can use the TFS as well. And Azure DevOps does support several project type or work item, which is basically basic, agile, CMMI, and Scrum. So based on your organization model, you can choose the respective project types. For example, if you are following the Scrum practice, you may have to create the Scrum project here. So for the demonstration, I'm just going ahead with the basic option. If you want to do the comparison, so let me switch back to the presentation. Yeah, so basically in the Azure does support several project types, which is basic, agile, Scrum, and CMMI. So you can find the different here. So in the basically it will allow you to create a simple work item, which is epic, issue, and task. But if you look at the agile model, you have an option to create features, you have options to create issues. But then if you look at the CMMI model, you have a little more extra options, which is basically change request, features, issue, requirements. There are a lot of things which you can track. So based on your organization's process that you are currently having, accordingly, you can select these options. So now we just created the project. For example, now I'm going to show you some of the capabilities from the Azure Board. So I have some data on my some another project. So this is the view of Azure Board. So basically in the Azure Board, you can create a work item and you can assign this to your respective project team members. So you have an ability to see what are the actions currently your team members are owning it. So you can see here each work item and its stages. So basically this is like a Kanban board where your project managers or your project lead can track the status of the individual work items. Now the next component, which is Azure Repo. So Azure Repo, it is nothing but a Git repository where you can manage your application source control, application source code, and this will give you the distributed source control mechanism. So pipeline is it allows you to automate the build, automate the test cases, automate the release activities. So how the pipeline looks here is you have basically in the next module we will explore more on creating the pipeline, integrating the pipelines with the Azure App Services. But then in this series, I'm just going to highlight it in a very high level. So what you are seeing here is there is a pipeline. Basically, this pipeline is already configured by me. So you see here there is a staging environment, there is a canary environment, there is a production environment, which is basically linked to the respective Azure service. In this case, I have an Azure App Service. I do have an App Service staging, and I do have a App Service slot, which is Canary. I do have a App Service, which is prod. So what I am doing here is I am integrating my App Service with this DevOps pipeline. And what happens is this is my repository, Azure Repo. Here I have my application source code. So whenever I make a code commit, this Azure DevOps is going to create a new build, and that new build is going to flow through this pipeline. So let's imagine I'm making some changes on my repo. So those changes will, those changes, basically first it creates a build process, and that build is added as an artifact here. And this is going to further pushed to the respective pipelines. So first it will go and deploy it on the staging. Now, once it is deployed on the staging, it will be further following the processes or the workflow, which is defining here. So for example, here, there are some pre-deployment conditions and there is a post-deployment conditions. So imagine you are building, you are releasing a product, and it is deployed on the staging. And before it goes to the production, you wanted to make sure somebody has to approve, or you may want to evaluate certain policies. So you can put a necessary deployment conditions. Let's for an example, if you want to put an approval procedure, so you can say you can enable the approver. You can, let's say. So when I do this, what happens is as soon as it's deployed on the staging, it is going to trigger an approval. Somebody has to go and manually verify and approve it. So we discussed DevOps is all about union of people, process, technology. So as part of the process, you have to define what are the pre-deployment conditions that you are going to configure, what are the post-deployment conditions you are going to configure. So Azure DevOps will give you a ability to configure the necessary workflow, necessary conditions to accelerate your application delivery. But at the same time, it will save you from the configuration drift. So there are some questions. Let me switch back to the question. Just give me a second. Yeah, so does pipeline will give the cross-platform options? So Azure DevOps does support with multiple integrations options. In fact, if, for example, if you want to build in certain environment, so let me just add some stage. I can just show you. So if you see here, you do have an option where in this case I have, in my case, my my application instance is running on the app service. So I have used the app service deployment concept. But then if you are deploying it on the Kubernetes, or if you are deploying it in the another different environment, you can choose the respective model. Azure does support the integrations with various services. Okay. So we just discussed about the pipeline. So pipeline is all about you have an ability to configure to automate the build, automate the test cases, and automate the release management activities. Now, artifacts.
Anthony, just a quick one before you proceed. There were also a couple of more questions. One was related to that particular section, so I don't want to miss on this one because it's actually asking who has access to all of the previous parts. So is it one manager? The question is from Ali. And Deepak had a question on the topics that we will be discussing in this series. Are they helping with the certification? Of course, he will need to continue with the practical part, but also if you can give us a little bit
Okay.
on these 2 points. Yeah.
Thanks. So Deepak have a question. Is it sufficient to complete the AZ400 certifications? So the objective of this learning series is to give you the end-to-end understanding of the DevOps transformation, and also this will give you the foundational elements from all aspects. So that's why we have made the 4 series. The first series, the objective is to give you the high-level understanding about what is DevOps and how we can use Azure DevOps. In the subsequent series, we will have pipelines. We will explore more on the pipelines. We will explore more on the repo. And then we will also have the third series. We will talk more on the continuous feedback mechanism, and the various deployment patterns, how we can take the feedbacks from the applications and how we can continuously improve the applications. And finally, we will have another series which will talks about the security and complaints aspect. Basically, this four-part learning series, it's an abstraction of AZ400, but then there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of integrations, mechanisms will be involved. For example, when it comes to source code management, you may have to integrate with some third-party tools. And when it comes to build verification, you may have to integrate with some Sonar Cloud or some other tools. So basically, this will give you the foundational knowledge, but then we can support you with the enhanced learning path, which is available in the Microsoft Learn platform as well. So who has access to this one manager? Yes. So the question is, when we create a project inside the DevOps, so you do have an option to configure the project settings. For example, you can create a multiple project. Basically, you can create a multiple projects inside the DevOps. And in this case, if you see, I have 3 projects, and each project I have the project specific settings where I can define who are allowed, who are the project team members. So which is something which you can configure inside the projects based on your requirement. Let's imagine you have a project which is called sales application. So let's imagine 10 developers are working in the sales application. So yes, you may add those 10 developers inside this project settings, and you can provide the necessary rights, what exactly they will be doing. So Azure DevOps will give you an option to configure the project specific settings. So there is some more questions coming. So do we need to deploy separate web app from all stages in the pipeline? Yeah, basically, when you create a, for example, if you look at this picture, this portal, I have 2 app service. One is staging, which is completely different environment, and I have another app service where it's a production environment. So inside the production, as part of the deployment pattern, I have a app slot, which is basically canary. So your pipeline, when you create a pipeline, your pipeline basically you will be referring to the respective endpoints. So for example, if you look at my existing pipeline, basically how I have integrated here, for example, let's go to the staging. In the staging, I have added one task, and in this task, I have basically linked to my current subscription, and this is pulling the available app services in the my website, my portal. Then I have an option to select the app service name. It is already configured. So similarly, if you are having multiple environment, depends on your deployment patterns. Some people may follow A/B testing method. Some people may follow just staging and production. Depends on your scenario. You can link to the respective services. So is it possible to create a connections between Jira task and Azure Board task? In fact, Azure DevOps have a well integration support with various tools which are available in the market, and you can make a connections. Yes, you can make a service connections with the various other tools as well. So I will be showing in the coming series, I will be showing several options, how we can integrate with Azure, how we can integrate with other services. So what are the authentication methods that we will be following? So it is as part of the upcoming modules that we will be covering. Okay, so now the next component is Artifact. So Artifact is all about managing your packages. So let's imagine you are making a build, and your build may require for some other applications. So if you wish to store your packages centrally, then yes, you can use the Azure Artifact. So Azure Artifact allow you to connect with your existing package feed like a Maven, NuGet, npm. So you have an integration options. You can connect Azure Artifact into the various feeds where you can store the packages and you can consume the packages as well. So Azure Test Plans basically will give you an ability to configure the test cases. So you can create a test cases, and this can be manual testing or this can be automated testing. And to perform a testing, you may require an environment. So Azure does provide several options like Azure Dev Test Lab. So you can create a Azure Dev Test Lab, which automatically, as part of the pipeline connection, you can add additional task which can automatically provision the dev test lab. You can use that dev test lab to perform various test cases, and then you can publish the test results into the test plans. So Azure test plans basically give you an ability to perform the test cases, and you can collect the data and you can publish it into your dashboard. So in short, Azure DevOps offers 5 different services, which is Azure Board, Azure Repo, Azure Pipeline, Azure Artifact, and Azure Test Plans. And you can use these tools when you transform. When you set up your DevOps culture, basically, you have to, you will be integrating these tools into the existing toolsets. So now the question that possibly comes to your mind, which is you may have some existing tools. For example, you may use Jira for Azure Board, instead of Azure Board, or you may use some other tools like a Jenkins for the build pipeline. So I have my existing tools. How can I integrate with my Azure DevOps? And how Azure DevOps is going to add more value on my existing investment, right? So Azure DevOps does support various integration options. In fact, you can integrate Azure DevOps into various stages. So you can use Jira. You know there are some integration capabilities available. You can use Jenkins. You can use with any testing tools like a Selenium. So the good news is yes, you can keep your investment safe, and Azure DevOps can integrate. You can integrate the Azure DevOps with the various services as well. Okay, so now. So the key points that you have to remember when you adopt the DevOps practice, your key focus is on uh, accelerating the continuous delivery, accelerating the continuous integration, and of course you are accelerating the continuous improvement. So how we are going to achieve the continuous improvement is basically, if you look at the DevOps pipeline, in the DevOps pipeline, once the build is successfully deployed on the production, for example, let's imagine this is my production stage and my build is successfully deployed. Now what we can do here is Azure have a monitoring ecosystem, which is Azure Monitor, and also application insights. So you can integrate these functionality, Azure Monitor applications insights, into your existing application, and you can continuously receive the telemetry data, and you can see if there is any room for improvement. Of course, there may be a time where you deploy something, then your CPU utilization may go up, or your memory utilization may go up, or there may be some unknown error might be reported. So you can take those informations using the help of Azure Monitor and application insights, and then you can continuously learning from the mistakes what you are making, and you can continuously making the new build and continuously making the new release. In this way, DevOps is accelerating the continuous integration, continuous delivery, and the continuous improvements as well. So the key objective is continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous improvement. Now, some of the key points that you can take this as a takeaway, which is everyone is responsible for the delivery process. So in the legacy model, we will have a development team, operations team, and we works on silo, and operations team not at all aware of what development is doing. But here, moving forward, we work as a one team. So everyone is responsible for the delivery process. Now, keep everything on the version control. So Azure provides the native version control, which is Azure Repo. But in case if you are using existing version control like a GitHub or Bitbucket or any other for that matter, yes, you can integrate with Azure DevOps. So keep everything in the version control. Now automate almost everything. So Azure DevOps will have a various integrations options with various tool sets. So you can basically automate several things. So for example, let me just quickly show you. So let's go to our pipeline. So let's imagine during the staging environment, probably if you want to build some test cases, to execute some test cases, for example, you need some environment to be provisioned. So you can, Azure DevOps does provide various tasks. For example, you just look for the dev test lab. So you can, this dev test lab basically it's allow developers to quickly provision the machines with all the artifacts installed. So in fact, you can integrate such tasks for the provisioning some VM or cleaning up this VM. You can add these tasks into your pipeline, and which can use for your any testing activities. So you have well integrations capabilities available as part of the DevOps. Now, the other key takeaway, if it is hurts, do it more frequently. So it's all about continuously learning from the mistakes what we are making. So don't feel bad if there is any issues, just do it more frequently so that you can have the very mature process. So done means it just released. So we are constantly taking the feedback from our existing system. So we will be get ready for the next release. And the final point, which is very important, which is build quality in, which means, as we know, DevOps is the vast. I mean, it can fit into many stages. So each stages there are some sub stages, and each stages there are some plenty of tools can be integrated. So our team should have an adequate skill set, and you should have the right tool sets, and you should have the right skill set in order to understand the whole ecosystem in a better way. So keep learning. The skilling is most important element when it comes to this transformation. So since we are moving towards the continuous learning model, so we will be there are a lot of updates that will be keep happening. So the skilling is one of the important element. That is what it talks about, build quality in. So have the right set of tool sets and have the right set of skill sets always in your team. So there are some questions. Let me switch back to the Q&A. So can you give an example of how Azure Artifact is used as part of the overall lifecycle? Yes. So for example, in this case, let me switch back to artifacts. So using the artifacts, basically you can connect to any of the existing feed. For example, if you have any existing package management system like npm, Maven, or NuGet, Gradle, so Azure DevOps have an integrations capabilities with various feeds. Now, if you want to store your packages into the any of these package managements, yes, you can consume those package management stream where you can publish your package. Or if you have any existing packages which is already published by any of your team and which you want to consume, yes, you have an integrations options where you can consume those packages from the existing feed. So there is one more questions. Can we create a reusable build template? So when you create a build, in fact, we will discuss more on the build process in the coming series. So for example, in this case, let me quickly show you my existing build. In this case, this is the build which we created. So it's all about the okay. So basically, to create a build, what we will be doing is Azure DevOps does provides the you know task or the capabilities where you can choose. If you want to build a Kubernetes environment, you can choose the respective task. You have a templates which is readily available. But if you want to reuse your existing template, now this is my existing pipeline configurations, and of course, if I want to reuse, I can reuse this templates. So there is a question about open data initiative, like how Azure DevOps is going to connect between SAP, Azure, Adobe. So in fact, Azure DevOps, you even predominantly used on the machine learning ecosystems as well, like ML Ops. Specific to this questions, probably in the coming series, I can answer this. If we have any integrations with the other services like SAP and Adobe. Okay. Yeah, so far we discussed about the very basics about the DevOps. Basically, we started with the importance of DevOps adoption. As technologies are continuously changing, there is a need for innovation and there is a need for modernization. And when we start adopting the DevOps and when we start integrating DevOps processes into our existing operations, I'm sure the application application delivery, it's going to be get accelerated, and the configuration drift and the failure rate is going to be reduced. Then how do we get started? So we have to think from three aspects. We have to think about people transformation. We have to think about the various processes that you are going to follow during the software development stages. And we have to have the right set of tools. In fact, Azure DevOps does provides the complete tool sets, but you can integrate with other tool sets wherever required. Then what can Azure DevOps do it for us? So basically Azure DevOps, you can fit into the complete stages. Azure DevOps does provide boards, pipelines, artifacts, test plans, which we can leverage to modernize our existing software development. And finally, keep your investment safe. If you have invested on the existing tool sets, yes, you can connect, you can continue to use your existing tool sets, you can integrate your existing tool sets with the Azure DevOps. So that's the end of this presentation. In the coming series, so we are planning to have some discussions around managing the source control, and we will be creating the pipelines from scratch, and we will be integrating the pipelines with the existing Azure services. So we will see how to enable the continuous delivery, how to enable the continuous integrations, and how you can publish your code from your VS Code, which will make a commit on the GitHub or the Azure Repo, which will automatically create a build, which will continuously go through the pipeline configurations. We will put a pre-deployment conditions, we will put a post-deployment conditions, set approval procedures, and following a series, which is module 3, we will talk more on the deployment patterns. So there are several deployment patterns such as A/B testing, green blue testing. So we will look at those deployment patterns, and we will see how we can receive the telemetry data, we'll receive the feedback from the application to improve the application. And finally, we will talk more on the security and compliance aspect. So what are the different stages where we have to think from the security when we publish the code, when we're doing the testing? We will talk all aspects of security in the 4th module. So that's the end of the today's presentation. I hope these informations were useful. So meanwhile, I will just check if there is any questions.
Thank you, Anthony, for today. Yes, there are more questions coming in, and you can find them on the published section here in the Q&A.
Yes, so will you be proposing the branching strategies? See, we will be discussing a lot about the branching strategies in the coming series. The next series, we will talk about the branching, and we will talk about the pull request, and we will see how to use, when to use. Yes, we will be covering. And there is another question. Is it common to integrate or reference pipeline templates in ARM template in order to automate Azure resource? So ARM template, it is Azure Resource Manager template. Basically, ARM template is used to provision any resources inside the Azure. So for example, if I go to my Azure portal, I have a application which is app service. Basically, this is app service. So I can build this app service using ARM template. But now, if you want to make something as an infrastructure as a code, then yes, you can integrate Azure DevOps with ARM templates to configure the infrastructure as a code. Now, the one what you are seeing here now, this is like more of inside the application. So we are publishing the application source code into this application. So yeah, the answer is yes, Azure DevOps does support ARM template integration. If you want to make any infrastructure as a code projects, yes, you can integrate. We do have several scripts. We do have several work. The build modules are available, which you can use definitely. So there is one more question. Can Azure DevOps be used for requirement planning specifically for accessibility? So Azure DevOps, it does support you on all aspects, in terms of planning, in terms of developing code, in terms of building, testing, releasing. On all aspects you can. So basically your team may have to transform. I mean, if I look at my current here about Azure Board, so I can track what are the work items, what are the backlogs, and what are the the task which is performed by my team. So in fact, let me switch back to another project. Yeah, so here if you look at this, I see the work item. I see I can, as a project lead, I can see, okay, what are the activities which is completed and what are the activities which is currently performing. I mean, working on, my team is working on it. And also you can have an integrated dashboard where you can have a track how many pull requests completed, how many build is completed, what is the overall task, how many work item pending. In fact, this dashboard's completely customizable. You can add as much as task you want, and it will allow you to add more tasks. You can customize it. There are a lot of options it will have. So definitely you can use it for your planning purpose or tracking purpose. Yes.
Okay, there was a follow-on point from Sam. He had a question earlier that you answered on, is there a need to deploy separate web apps for all stages in the pipeline, stage, production, test, etc.? And can we use just one app slot? So the follow-on point is that can we use web app deployment slots instead of creating separate? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the short answer is it really depends on how you want to separate staging from production. So typically the slots inside the production. So staging, why do we do staging? Because we don't want to interrupt the production. So we do the first we do it on the staging where we do all kind of tests, and then we slowly move into the production. But staging slot, deployment slots also give you an ability to deploy your workload into the productions. So this is all about the deployment pattern that you are going to select. So there are several deployment patterns. As part of the industry best practices, you can pick the respective deployment pattern. So if your application is okay to follow A/B testing, then probably yes, you can just do the single stage application instance where you can have a multiple staging slot. So it really depends on what you need for your application.
Right, we got a few minutes left on today's session, and there are more questions coming in on the Q&A guidelines for Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, and so on.
Yeah. So
yeah,
as I said, there are several tools available and there are several stages. So in fact, GitHub Action also supports in many way. It's really up to you. Basically, we can do the side-by-side comparison on what is better, and we can pick the right tool. In fact, we have integration capabilities. So it's really depends on um, what we want to achieve.
so I would just like to highly encourage everyone that is on the call today to not miss the upcoming 3 sessions in this 4-part series. I posted the link in. You will find them in the Q&A tab. So please just go there, RSVP, and join us next week for the coming 3 weeks, where you will explore more and learn with Anthony all about DevOps.
So I hope that that was informative. And in the coming modules, yes, we will be covering a lot on various strategies. So I hope that's going to give you the complete foundation skills on the DevOps. Then you can start developing your skills on through the Microsoft Learn platform.
Awesome. And if you missed any part of today's session, you can watch it again on the YouTube channel. We are recording these sessions and they will be available in a playlist on YouTube once everything, all the sessions are done. And this one will be available also soon on YouTube. So if you miss any part, you want to review anything, don't worry. Channel has the video very soon. And yeah, quick reminder about the survey. I posted very early at the beginning of the session. The survey is a place where you can submit all your feedback, all the topics that you would love to see at the Reactor. It helps us understand more about the topics that you are interested in. So please take a minute to share your feedback. Subscribe to our newsletter. That's the last link on the screen you see there. This is a curated monthly newsletter that I'm gonna also share the link with you in the Q&A. This helps you stay up to date with all the happenings at the Reactors. Of course, on Meetup, we have all the events, but also it's good to stay up to date with all the content that is happening across the world. Now that all the events are happening online, we share a lot of events from across the EMEA region, and you will happen to enjoy all this free and open learning opportunities. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Anthony, again for giving us your time to share all this experience throughout this series. And we are looking forward to having you again next week.
Thank you, Hussam.
All right. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. Bye-bye.